I don't even know where to start. I'm still very bitter about this. Welcome to another rendition of The First 20. The First 20 is something that I started when I first started this channel to get myself to try different things that I'd never done before and put 20 hours of practice into it, to give myself a goal to reach, and also see what I can get from going from 0 to 20 hours. And by extension, show all of you what can be done when you go from nothing to 20 hours with a little bit of direction. In this particular series, I decided to take on espresso, and by extension, espresso-based drinks. Why? I started drinking that as part of my morning routine, and I really started to enjoy it, and I started to associate an emotion with having it every morning. Then I decided, why not be a little bit more resourceful and learn how to do it myself? So I did. And so after a year of deciding to do this, I finally pulled the trigger, ordered all of the things I was going to use to start my journey, filmed all of it, and proceeded to lose the footage. The fortunate thing is the fact that the episode really just consisted of me getting the equipment, receiving it in the mail, talking about some of the things that I had bought to start this whole journey. So fortunately, you didn't miss much. On a more positive note, I now make some pretty darn good espresso-based drinks. I don't even need to go to the coffee shop anymore. It tastes exactly like my favorite coffee shop makes it. And actually, now that I understand the inner workings, I can actually make it taste better depending on what mood I'm in that day. Didn't expect that to happen. One thing I did realize during this whole thing, it is very difficult to make this process interesting. And I don't know if I did any better of a job at it. Nonetheless, here you are. And if I stay on schedule, and if you stick around till the end of this series, there's going to be a little bonus that came out of all of this. Nonetheless, we are now going to begin with what is now episode 1, where I get a little bit more acquainted with the equipment that will be accompanying me on this journey. Before first use, machine prep, soak the filter in water for 5 minutes. I started that. Pressure gauge, yep, got one of those. I'll tell you what, this does not make for an exciting first 20 hours. You couldn't at least wear a different shirt than me? All right, the first thing you gotta do is set up the filter for the water tank in the back. Set the filter in some water for a few minutes? Great, okay. Then stick it in and set the change date on the filter for 2 months ahead on the water tank. Did you do that yet?
Well, no, because
Right. Once you do that, you clean out the portafilter with some soap and water. Don't be throwing that thing in the dishwasher. You know what? Clean all the stuff you got with it right now. Speaking of cleaning, where are your cleaning supplies? Did you check behind the drip tray in the little compartment? Good. All right. Now you see all those buttons up top? You know how those function? I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. You got the knob that controls how long you grind for, and the button for the size filter you got. What size filter you got there? Single or double shot? Single? Double? Whatever. Just make sure you don't confuse that knob for the grind size setting on the side there. No, the other side, by the hopper, you dingus. Anyway, back to the buttons. On the other side, you got size buttons over the group head. Group head? The group head, where you put the portafilter. Okay, you got single and double shot volumes, and you can reprogram them. You know how to do that, right? You gotta hold the, what? Never mind, just look at the manual. Okay, now all the way on the right, you got a knob that controls the hot water for steam or hot water.
So is it steam?
By the way, you purge the system. All right, you gotta purge the system. Use a full tank of water. You didn't even fill the tank yet.
Well, no,
once you fill the tank, run a double shot with no coffee in it, and then clean out the steam wand by switching between steam and hot water, steam and hot water, steam and hot water, steam and hot water. Speaking of purging, you better make sure you know how to clean this thing regularly. You know how to use the cleaning tablets? What about the descaling process? Just read the manual. That's about it. It ain't that hard. You got it? Did you turn the thing on yet? Great, you'll be fine. I'll see you later. And make sure you use filtered water. All right, so what was all that nonsense about? Well, the machine is very capable and it's got a lot of functions to it. But for the purposes of setting out a particular goal over these next 20 hours, I wanted to break down what it is I'm trying to achieve, with what skill set, and then reverse engineer that to the machine. Now, fortunately, this is a really good entry-level machine, the Breville Barista Express, and it has just enough functionality for a beginner to start making espresso based on the recipe, but also be able to tweak just enough. Now, it has certain limitations. The grind sizes are not sort of seamless. They have notches, which makes it a little bit difficult to fine-tune that. Again, that's kind of based on what I've been reading, a function that's a bit beyond what I need right now. The other thing is it's a single boiler, not a dual boiler, which means if I wanted to pull espresso and steam milk at the same time, I couldn't do that. I'd have to do one then the other. The reason why this poses a problem is because the temperature of the water has to change for steaming and for the espresso. And so it's difficult to go back and forth. But we're not in a commercial setting. This is just me making at most 2 cups at a time. I mean, it won't even happen there. So having the single boiler and having these limitations is, I think, fine for right now. And there's plenty of people out there who have used their expertise to give ideas on how to use this particular machine. Now, with regards to the functions on this machine, you have your built-in hopper on top where you can pour in your coffee and grind it right then and there. Functioning right after that is your ability to decide how long you want the hopper to run, which is what that knob is for. And then you have the ability to program a single shot or a double shot when it comes to how much is being ground. And you have certain size filters. You have single and double filters. Now, this does have the ability for you to manually grind for however long you want by pushing in the portafilter to hit the button. And this does 2 things. Number one, it sort of obviates the need to set that knob. And the other thing is you don't need to use the buttons. That's something that I'm going to do because we're learning to dial in the right amount of coffee for your espresso. The other thing I'm gonna do, which I've learned by looking at some of these experts, is rather than fill the hopper with beans and need to use the timer or the buttons that are pre-programmed, I'm only going to pour in the amount of beans that are going to give me the amount of grind that I need. And we'll get into that as we get into the process. The really cool thing at the bottom is the drip tray, and that needs to be cleaned regularly. It comes right out. But the really cool thing is there's a hook that has a tray behind the drip tray that keeps all of your cleaning tablets and cleaning supplies or whatever else you want to put back there. And that's really thoughtful because this thing gets hot. And wanting to reach back in there to grab it, you're gonna burn yourself. So it's just really convenient that that comes out that way. I did show you that I put in a water filtration system. Now you can get one of those carbon filtration jugs and fill that with water, put it in the fridge, whatever you wanna do. I decided to get the inline system. It was extremely easy to install. It just required taking the hose, sticking it to the filter, and then the filter up to the sink. Took me less than 5 minutes. It's a carbon filter. What it does not do is distill the water. Filtered water is really important to affect the taste of the espresso that you have. And I'll tell you, as soon as I installed the filter and drank a cup of water, it tastes completely different. And I'm in an area right now that has a very weird tasting water. Not to mention, there's a hard water here because when I, for example, throw water onto my cast iron and it evaporates, there's marks left there. You can taste it. There's a huge difference. What you don't want to do is use reverse osmosis or distilled water. One of the things you can do, and you can find this online, is you can buy bottled water to use with the machine. And there's actually a bunch of articles out there that talk about specific companies that make the best bottled water for espresso in particular. They don't make it for espresso making, but it just so happens to be water that's considered the best. Crystal Geyser seems to be on the top of everybody's list. But if you want to decide to get a filtration system, or if you use bottled water like Aquafina is reverse osmosis, I would not use that or distilled water. And the reason is this. One of the concepts we're gonna come across a lot when making espresso is the fact that water is a solvent. It's a carrier. And it carries minerals in it, but if you get distilled water, there's not anything in it that's being carried. So it's hungry for minerals. It's hungry to carry things. It's a negative gradient, so to speak. So when you use distilled water running through a machine like this, or if you have a hookup directly to your machine, if it's like a commercial grade, the distilled water will actually start to erode the piping. It'll pull nutrients and it'll pull minerals and elements and whatnot, metals from the piping, and it'll actually destroy your machine. So you don't want to use distilled or reverse osmosis, but you do want to use filtered water, preferably a carbon filter. So now I'm just going to go ahead and purge the system through a full tank of water, clean the tank out first since this is all brand new, run the system through, clean it out, get a little acquainted with it, and go from there. The next stop after that is grabbing some beans, but also going on a little field trip to taste the different espressos.